My name is James Callahan. I'm 35 years old, a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, and as I write this, I'm sitting in a rented car outside a church in Austin, Texas. It's my little brother's wedding today, and I haven't been back here in almost 8 years. It's strange how quickly a place can feel foreign. The streets still have the same cracks I used to ride my bike over, the same trees I used to climb with Brian, but none of it feels like it belongs to me anymore. Coming back feels like stepping into a photo of a life that moved on without me, like a home I used to rent but never owned. My brother and I used to be close before everything changed. Before college letters and career talks. Before my father started keeping track of whose name showed up in which alumni newsletter. Brian went down the path they wanted. 4 years at a top university, then a master's degree, then a tech job that lets him bring his laptop to coffee shops and talk about stocks. I chose boot camp. My father never forgave me for that. He didn't say it out loud, not at first, but I could see it in the way he looked at me when I came home in uniform, like I was playing dress-up, like I had chosen something lesser, something embarrassing, something he couldn't brag about to his golf buddies. Even when I made officer, even when I deployed overseas, even when my name was in the papers, he always introduced me the same way. This is James, he's in the military. As if that explained everything and nothing all at once. He said it like an apology, like a disclaimer for my presence. I stopped coming home for the holidays after a while. It was easier not to be reminded of the gap between us. Easier not to see my mother's forced smiles or hear her say, "Maybe your father didn't mean it like that." I knew exactly how he meant it. Every pause, every look, every backhanded compliment. You could have gone so far if you just applied yourself. That was his favorite line. When Brian sent the wedding invitation, I didn't RSVP right away. I stared at the envelope for a week. I don't hate my brother, I'm proud of him, in my own way. But I knew walking back into that room meant walking back into years of being the wrong son. The truth is, I almost didn't come. I had an out. My deployment had just ended. I could have said I needed rest, that I was processing things. No one would have questioned it. But something in me couldn't let it go. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was spite, maybe it was the stubborn part of me that wanted to see if anything had changed. Spoiler, it hadn't. I walked into that church lobby and felt 30 years of judgment settle on my shoulders like an old uniform. The same nods, the same tight smiles. My father was already inside, probably giving someone a rundown of Brian's job title, his company, and the way his startup just raised another round of funding. That was how he measured worth. Eroi per child. And me? I was still the wild card. The one who came back with scars no one could see and stories no one wanted to hear. The one who kept showing up in photographs out of uniform just to make everyone more comfortable. The one who was tolerated, not celebrated. But I wasn't here for them. I reminded myself of that with every step. I was here for Brian, or at least, that's what I told myself as I opened the door and walked back into the past. The reception was held in a beautifully lit barn outside of Austin, with string lights overhead and soft music playing while people shuffled between tables. I sat near the back, not far enough to go unnoticed, but far enough to pretend I wasn't part of the inner circle. I had a glass of water in front of me, half-melted ice floating on top, untouched since I sat down. People were laughing. Toasts had already started. First, the best man, who nailed every joke, then one of Brian's college friends, who talked too long about a camping trip no one else cared about. When my father stood, the room leaned in a little. He had that kind of presence. Not because he was kind or charismatic, but because when he spoke, people listened. He began with Brian. Talked about how proud he was of his youngest son, how Brian had always been the smart one. He called him disciplined, focused, and ambitious. Everyone nodded, some even clapped. He listed off degrees like they were military ranks. Mentioned the engineering firm, the recent promotion, and the new condo in Denver. Then he paused, looked across the room, and said it. And that's James, over there. He's in the military. I think he handles clerical work or something like that. Right, James? A few people laughed. It wasn't cruel, just confused and awkward. The kind of laugh people give when they're not sure if they should be laughing. I felt my spine straighten without meaning to. I smiled. That small, practiced smile you give when the punchline is you and you don't want to ruin the party. No one asked me to clarify. No one turned to follow up. They just moved on. My father raised his glass, toasted Brian again, and sat down like nothing had happened. I kept that smile on for a full minute, then I let it fade. I looked down at my plate. Chicken and mashed potatoes, cold now. The kind of meal you don't eat so much as rearrange, just to look busy. Someone at my table muttered something about military service being honorable, but their voice trailed off before it reached me. What no one in that room knew was that I had led men into combat, that I had written letters to mothers, that I had stood in the rain in foreign countries, listening to the last words of people I was responsible for, that I had been promoted through the ranks not because I asked for it, but because I earned it with every call, every order, every impossible decision I had to make. What they heard was the clerk. What they saw was a man in a suit who didn't look any different from the bartender or the driver who dropped them off. What they didn't see was the uniform folded carefully in my bag, the medals tucked away in a drawer, the stories I never bothered to tell because they never asked. I don't know why it still stung. Maybe because it came from him. Maybe because a part of me, a stupid hopeful part, still thought that after all this time, he'd at least say lieutenant colonel, that he'd at least get the title right. But no. To him, I was still the dropout, the one who chose something else, the one he couldn't explain at dinner parties, so he stopped trying. The music started again, upbeat and warm. People clinked glasses and leaned in close. I stayed in my seat, watching it all like a stranger. I wasn't angry. Not then. Anger would have meant I still cared. What I felt was something colder, quieter, a kind of dull ache. The ache of being misrepresented so publicly by someone who should have known better. I looked around the room and thought, if I left right now, no one would notice, maybe not even Brian. But I didn't leave. I stayed. Not for him. Not for my father. I stayed because I had a feeling this night wasn't over yet. Not for me. Across the room, someone was watching me. I noticed it in the middle of a toast, during a lull when the music had faded and the crowd shifted in their seats. A man at one of the side tables, not old but seasoned, sat frozen with his glass halfway to his mouth. His eyes hadn't moved since my father spoke. They were locked on me, not in confusion, not in judgment, just fixed, focused, like he was trying to confirm something. I didn't recognize him at first. Clean-shaven, no uniform, dressed like everyone else. But there was something in the way he held himself, shoulders back, chin up. Not the kind of posture you lose easily. Not the kind you learn from textbooks. I'd seen that stance 100 times in the field. He blinked once, like he was waking up from a thought, then slowly set his glass down, still watching. Not glaring, not intruding, just steady and still, like he was reading something no one else could see. There was a flicker of something in his face when he looked over at my father. Disbelief, disapproval. But he didn't speak. He leaned back slightly, arms crossed. His gaze dropped for a moment, then returned, softer now, recognizing, remembering. I turned away like I hadn't noticed. I didn't want to invite conversation, not yet. But my heart had already picked up pace. Not from fear, but something else. Like a pressure shift in the air before a storm. A feeling that something small had just begun moving in the background. From the edge of my vision, I saw him shift again, reaching for his phone, typing something with short, precise strokes. Not scrolling, not texting for fun, intentional, focused. A server passed between us. When the tray cleared, his eyes were still there. This time, I met them, just for a second. His head dipped slightly, a gesture almost too small to notice. But I noticed. It wasn't a greeting, it was respect. Quiet, unspoken, but solid. I didn't know his name, not yet. But I knew the look. He wasn't a stranger, he was a soldier, one of mine. And for the first time that night, I didn't feel invisible. Something was coming. I could feel it. He kept his phone low, just above his lap, tapping with quiet precision. No scrolling, no photos, just a few lines, then send. I watched from the corner of my eye as he slipped it back into his jacket like nothing happened. A minute later, the shift began. One person, 2 tables over, picked up their phone, then another. Soft glows began to dot the room, like candles flickering in the dark. At first, I thought it was just wedding boredom, people checking messages, stepping out of the moment. But then the glances started. From phones to me, from laughter to confusion. One woman tilted her screen toward her husband, and his eyebrows pulled tight. Someone at my table whispered something. My name, my full name. I heard it, just barely, under the music. A second later, another voice followed, reading from a screen. Lieutenant Colonel, Bronze Star, Joint Service Commendation. Their tones shifted as they read, disbelief hardening into something else. My father hadn't noticed yet. He was too busy chatting with one of Brian's coworkers, still basking in his spotlight. But the spotlight was moving, not in a rush, not dramatic, just slowly, steadily, inching across the room toward me. More phones came out, more murmurs, more heads are turning. They were connecting the dots now. Headlines, citations, a press photo in full dress uniform. My face, younger but unmistakable. My rank is printed in bold beneath it. Everything I had never brought up, now unfolding in whispers and blue light. The music didn't stop, but it felt like it did. Conversation thinned. The clinking of glasses faded. Even the laughter at the far end of the room lost its edge, trailing off as eyes kept moving toward me. Someone stood. Not the man from before. A younger guy, maybe college age. He looked at his phone, then at me, then back at his phone. His mouth opened, like he was about to say something, but he didn't. Then came the quiet. Heavy, loaded. Like the moment before thunder. I didn't move, didn't flinch. Just sat there, still and steady. Whatever was coming, it was already on its way, and I wasn't going to stop it. The silence was thick, not awkward, not confused, heavy. Like everyone in the room had stopped breathing at the same time, unsure what came next. Then he stood, the same man who had been watching me since the toast. He didn't raise his voice or clear his throat. He just spoke, steady and sure, as if the words had been waiting for years. Sir, if I may, with all due respect, your son is not a military clerk. Heads turned. My father looked up, caught off guard by the interruption. The man didn't flinch. I served under Lieutenant Colonel James Callahan. He led our unit through Kandahar in 2015. We lost 4 vehicles to IEDs that month. He personally pulled 2 men out of burning wreckage. He didn't wait for orders, he didn't hesitate, and he didn't leave anyone behind. There was no applause, just stillness. The kind of stillness that only truth can create. He didn't stop there. He spoke of James's citations, his leadership, and the way younger soldiers looked up to him like he were untouchable. Said he'd never seen a man earn respect the way James did. Not by shouting, not by rank, but by standing between danger and everyone else every single time. You want to know who he is? Search his name, go ahead, pull out your phones. Read what's out there. I promise you, it'll take less than a minute. And just like that, the silence broke. Screens lit up across the room again. But this time, no one looked confused. No one was whispering jokes. They were reading. My photo, my record. My name is on press releases and memorial rosters. One woman gasped. A man 2 rows over let out a quiet damn under his breath. My mother had her hand over her mouth, tears forming even before she blinked. The man didn't sit down. He just turned to me, locked eyes, and gave the smallest nod. No speech, no praise, just truth. My father didn't say anything. He looked frozen, hands clasped on the table, staring at his own reflection in the glass. I stayed seated too, but inside, something shifted. Not pride, not vindication, just relief. like someone had finally opened a window after years of pretending the room didn't need air. It wasn't about glory, it had never been. But hearing the truth out loud, in front of them all, felt like justice. The room stayed still for a breath too long. No one spoke, no one moved. It felt like even the music knew to keep quiet. Then the man who had spoken raised his hand to his brow and saluted. No words, no flourish. Just a clean, firm gesture of respect, held for a beat, then lowered. It was quiet, but it landed like a thunderclap. People turned toward me now, not to stare, but to see. Brian stood next. My little brother, in his sharp navy suit, barely blinked. He looked across the room at me, jaw tight, eyes glassy, then stood tall beside the man. He didn't say anything either. He just stood. Then came another. Someone at the center table, then a woman was behind them. Another man was near the bar. One by one, slow but sure, they rose from their seats. No one clapped, no one called attention. They just stood. Silent, still, but steady. By the time the fifth person rose, it was no longer quiet. It was reverent, like a tide rolling in, table by table, lifting everyone with it. In a matter of seconds, the entire room was on its feet. All except him. My father hadn't moved. He sat with both hands on the table, fingers laced together. His shoulders were stiff, his eyes locked somewhere on the floor in front of him. Then he stood. Not quickly, not proudly, slowly, as if the weight of it all had finally landed. He didn't look at me, not yet. His chin dropped, and for a moment, he just stood there, facing down, silent like the rest. When he finally lifted his head, his eyes didn't hold the same sharpness I remembered. Just something hollow, tired, regretful. He didn't salute. He didn't speak. But he gave a small nod, then lowered his gaze again, like he couldn't quite carry the look in my eyes. And in that one gesture, he said everything he never dared to say out loud. It wasn't the apology I dreamed of, but it was real. I didn't rise from my seat. I stayed still, let the moment pass over me, through me. The warmth, the silence, the shift I never thought I'd see. It wasn't pride that filled my chest. It was something deeper, a release, like breathing fully for the first time in years. For once they saw me, not the version they wanted, the truth. I didn't wait for the music to start again. I didn't look around to see who was still watching. I just stood up, buttoned my jacket, and walked toward the door. The air felt lighter on the way out. Not because anything had been fixed, not because I was suddenly the hero, but because something that had been buried for years had finally been pulled into the light. And that was enough. I passed by the tables without a word. A few people stepped aside. Some nodded, some just watched. It didn't matter. I wasn't walking out to make a point. I wasn't leaving in anger. I had simply finished what I came to do. The man who spoke, my former soldier, was standing by the door. He didn't say anything right away. Just looked at me with the kind of expression that says everything words can't. I stopped beside him. "Thank you." That's all I said. He nodded once. Then he asked how it felt. I paused, searching for something honest. I didn't come here to be honored. I just needed the truth to be known. He didn't respond with a speech, just patted my shoulder once and let me go. That was more than enough. Outside, the night air was cool. The stars were out. Somewhere behind me, someone finally turned the music back on. It sounded distant, like it belonged to another story. I didn't feel triumphant, I felt clean. Like a weight I'd carried through every holiday, every forced smile, every skipped conversation had finally been set down. Not thrown, not crushed. Just placed gently on the ground and left behind. I thought about my dad, still standing at his table, trying to figure out how to rewrite the version of me he'd always told himself was true. I didn't hate him, not even now. But I also didn't owe him anything. The man I had become didn't come from his approval. He came from the choices I made when no one was watching. From the orders I gave when the stakes were real. From the men who followed me, not because they had to, but because they believed in something more than rank. That's who I am. That's who I've always been. And now, finally, they knew. I walked down the gravel path alone. Not lonely, just alone. And for the first time in years, I was okay with that. A few days after the wedding, my phone rang. It was my father. I let it go to voicemail. He called again the next day, then again a few days after that. His messages were short, just checking in. Thought we could talk. Hope you're doing okay. They weren't angry. They weren't full of excuses either. Just quiet attempts at something that sounded like regret. I haven't called him back. It's not because I'm angry. I'm not. Whatever heat I carried for years burned out somewhere along the way. It's not even resentment now. It's space. A kind of emotional distance that keeps me steady. I don't hate him. I don't wish him harm. I just don't forget. Forgiveness, for me, isn't about pretending none of it happened. It's not about smoothing it over so we can sit at the same table again and act like the words he used to say didn't dig trenches inside me. It's not about pretending that being overlooked for decades didn't shape who I became. It's about choosing not to carry that pain anymore. That's what I've done. I've put it down. That's as far as I can go right now. Sometimes, I wonder what he felt in that moment when the crowd stood, when the truth came out. I wonder if he saw me clearly for the first time, or if he just felt embarrassed that others saw what he refused to. I guess I'll never know. And maybe that's fine. I've learned that some wounds don't need to be reopened to heal. They just need time and quiet, and enough distance to stop the bleeding. Brian texted me later that week. He said he was proud of me, said he was sorry too, for never asking more. That one I answered. I told him I appreciated it. I told him I was proud of him too. That conversation mattered more than the others. My mother sent me an old photo the next morning, me in uniform, standing next to a younger version of her. She didn't write a caption. She didn't need to. That's the kind of quiet I can live with. I'm not looking for a speech. I'm not looking for redemption. I'm just looking forward, with fewer weights and a little more peace. Some stories don't need a perfect ending, just an honest one, and that's what this is.